My name is Kyle Willis, and this is Marketing from the Roosevelt Room. Welcome back to Marketing from the Roosevelt Room. We are wrapping up our series on sales today, and it is a little remiss to not say I saved the best for last. I'm super excited for where we're going in today's podcast. Have a special guest on the show, Cassie Fields, who's the VP of Sales and Business Development at FieldEdge. She's done some marvelous things that I don't want to steal any thunder yet, other than talk about some mammoth growth that she's brought to her company through some of her techniques and the method she's brought into the sales team. I mean, we're talking growth from $7 million to $35 million in a very short time. And Cassie's here with us today to talk about pillars for scaling your business with what I love, that we're not going to lose our mind doing it. So Cassie, it is an honor to have you on the show here today.
Thank you very much. I appreciate you having me. Very excited for the discussion.
Thank you. Thank you. So Cassie, I'd love to kind of just start off by learning a little bit about you before you got into FieldEdge. You know, as I learned a little from our conversation initially, that you came into FieldEdge as it was already existing. You weren't there from day one. You brought some great growth there. We'll talk about who FieldEdge is and what they do in a moment. But give me a little just background of where did you get started? Where did the passion for sales, business begin, that we could then talk about how it led to FieldEdge?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think it's kind of always been in my DNA, as cliche as that probably sounds.
Sure.
But in terms of like starting a career, you know, I started in outside telecom sales, which, by the way, very, very impressed by people that continue to grind in and day out in outside sales. But that was hitting 50 doors a day, you know, Going out and trying to convince people to buy T1s for their business to run their phone and internet.
Wow.
And so it was a different kind of sale, but, you know, got into inside sales shortly after that, and was a part of a publicly traded UK-based business, NCC Group, which is a cybersecurity company. And so that was kind of the launching pad for my career. You know, did a lot of, individual contributor roles there, just kind of promoting up the ladder, so to speak, in terms of working in the SMB and all the way up to enterprise. So got an interesting taste of different types of complex sales and transactional sales. Eventually helped those guys launch a global product. So taking that globally, and that was a pretty fantastic experience, and just learning more about go-to-market strategy and the collaboration that you require cross-functionally to make those things happen. So once we did that, and that's, you know, now that's a multi-million-dollar recurring revenue line for the business, you know, they asked me to take on sales across the North American market for the business. And so that really was a really interesting time, you know, working in a publicly traded corporation. You know, we were able to see in the first year and a half of me working there, 20% year-over-year bookings growth, which for a publicly traded company was pretty solid at the time by comparison to previous year's growth.
Yeah.
But I really wanted to get into something more exciting and, you know, really become a part of something where I could build a foundation and help the business grow. And that's when I found FieldEdge. And boy, did I get what I asked for.
Well, tell us then, so start off first, who is FieldEdge? What is it you do? And then as my follow-up question to that, when you talk about you got what you asked for, where did you begin with them? What was kind of the day one to let's lead up to where we are today?
Yeah, so when I came into the business, FieldEdge has actually been around for 40 years this year.
Oh,
and
awesome.
so what we do is we provide an end-to-end SaaS solution for the service contractor industry. So, you know, we do everything through our platform and in terms of lead management and lead capture for these businesses, all the way through to, you know, how they leverage mobile technology in the field and ultimately take payment and integrate that back into their accounting platforms. So primarily focus in the HVAC, plumbing, and electrical markets. But, you know, as I said, being in business for 40 years, we've actually created 4 different products along the way. And so when I joined, we had about 3,000 customers on our legacy on-premise product, ESC. And they had been developing the cloud-based product for the market at the time for a couple of years, but we're really wanting to start to pour some gasoline on that fire. And so, we had about 4 account executives and SDRs total at the time. And we've now grown that today to about a team of a little over 50. And so in about a 2.5-year period, which has been really exciting and also challenging in different ways.
First off, that's amazing. Congratulations on that accomplishment. I hope our audience hears in that the magnitude in what you've created there and what you've been able to lead. And tell me a little bit in that growth of your SDRs. What's the time period? What did that look like? And was that a quick process for you, or what was being able to lead that team? I think my first question I think about is, finding that right talent and being able to build that team that can sustain the growth that you guys are seeing.
Yeah, it's a great question. I think while we have grown quickly, we've also grown methodically. And so I think, you see a lot of businesses that look to fill seats very quickly to add heads, which they expect to yield revenue. And at the end of the day, that's not always an effective tactic. At least it wasn't for us. We monitor very closely CAC by channel. And so, as we were at the time when I joined, there were 2 SDRs. There really was no process or foundation for that department. And Adam Sato, our director of sales development, joined with me and really worked to build a foundation and very carefully built that team and scaled it. So we were constantly monitoring CAC to make sure that we were, and we can talk about CAC. That's probably an hour-long podcast in and of itself because I know it's controversial. But, we monitored that as we continue to add heads just to make sure that our production per SDR remained solid and within the sort of guardrails that we wanted to maintain. So I'd say within the first year, we scaled up to about 10 SDRs. We're going to be at 30 by the end of this year. So, and ended 2018 at about 18. So, that team has done a fantastic job of continuing to maintain a strong culture and provide the resources needed to really be successful. Cause it's a tough role.
Sure.
For sure.
Oh, absolutely. Excuse me. And you highlighted something that I'd love to kind of just dig into a little deeper, the aspect of being able to grow methodically, as being a foundation to sustain the growth and creating that culture. With what you're able to share, what did you see as needing to change in the methods as you and I have talked about? That's method and mindset being such a foundation, such a heart to our podcast here, believing that there's a right method, a right mindset to marketing and sales that works. And as you saw, there's a method that needed to change. So can you give any insights to what you saw, some of the issues that needed to change and what your process was to bring about that change to both the culture and the team?
Yeah, so absolutely. So I think there are a couple of, as you mentioned, key pillars that I focus on, and that we monitor very closely as we began to scale the org. Not just the sales team, not just the SDR team, but the account executive team and spinning up business development. All of those things really center around a couple of key things, and the first being culture. Again, hate to be cliche about it, but it is absolutely the number one most important thing that you can do, particularly for a sales org, and that's to maintain culture. And I think people mistake culture sometimes for ping pong tables and beer kegs. That's definitely, it's a component. We have it, I get it. But at the end of the day, when people come into FieldEdge, and this has happened since day one, and part of that, frankly, was we lucked out. We inherited a strong culture and sort of family-oriented and focused team that was incredibly collaborative from day one, and we were able to expand on that. But I think a part of doing that was doing a couple of key things. First was intense coaching and development of functional and professional development and professional skills for reps. So a lot of SDRs in particular, as they come in, graduating from college. This may be their first job. This may be at best their second.
Yeah.
And so, it's giving them the skill sets that they need, understanding their 401k, understanding their benefits. Like, these are professional development skills that we focus on and invest in to make sure that they understand that they matter and we want to help them grow as individuals, but also in those functional skills that are so critical and helping them understand the sales fundamentals. What are the key elements of the conversation? Continuously coaching and providing that feedback, because that young, they really need it in their careers. And that's just investment in people, right? But the second piece of that is team learning and collaboration. So that has been so fundamental to maintaining such a great culture at FieldEdge.
Yeah.
And it often gets lost as you're scaling a business. So the way that we focus on that is, we do a lot of team meetings and peer reviews. So I'll put in a plug here. We do use Gong for all of our call recording and, AI and things like that for sales conversations. Love that tool. Could not operate without it. And so we use that to come in and deploy specific parts of calls where we're, using different tactics or techniques. And actually the team members will evaluate each other. And
cool.
something about that team collaboration and like review and helping each other get better every day really helps people feel connected and feel like, they're constantly learning something new from their peers that helps them to be that much better the next day, if that makes sense.
It absolutely does. Yeah.
Yeah. And I guess the last piece of culture that I'll mention, and then I'll shut up. Culture is just the hot button. The last piece is this idea of creating a culture of radical candor. I don't know if you've read that book, but fantastic book as well on just understanding how to create a dynamic within your team where you and your team members can be radically, candid with each other and sharing in a positive and professional way, really open feedback about processes and just generally feedback on the job. And so I think that we execute that really well. And as a result, people feel like they can be open and that they're heard.
I love that. And in that aspect of being able to have the radical candor, I have to imagine that didn't happen overnight. And in both the team being able to share that with each other, the feedback, being able to take that critique as they're going over sales calls together, much less than, you being able to bring these initiatives to leadership and say, hey, I see some issues in our culture that need to change. What I think about, our people who are listening to our podcast here and saying, love all that. Radical candor sounds awesome. Team collaboration sounds great, but I don't know where my boss would be if I brought that idea to him right now. What was that process like for you in being able to cast that vision and first off, tell your peers, tell your leadership team that there's an issue, that there's something that needs to change? And that you have a solution they need to trust and allow you to try to implement.
Yeah, it's a fair point. And I think, fortunately or unfortunately, it has to start at the top. So I think that you've got to have a management team that believes in, receiving candid feedback and taking that in a constructive way and being able to apply it. If you don't have that, it's very difficult, to your point, to go up to your boss and be radically candid about a situation if they're not bought into that in reverse. And so a great way that starts from the top is, having open conversations and actually asking for feedback on what management can be doing better, but not just asking that, really meaning it. Because I find often, in one-on-ones or in quarterly reviews, if you've got that built into your process, people will ask, what can I be doing to better support you? But if we don't act on that, and if we don't ask for really open feedback and ask probing questions, which allows an environment for people to be honest, then we'll never get to a point where, that they're comfortable receiving that in return, if that makes sense.
It does. I love that.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the last thing that matters in that is you got to help your people win. So I know that seems like a small thing, but it's a lot different as a leader. If you've gotten in and you've rolled up your sleeves and you've helped somebody win, and then you come back with positive feedback or constructive feedback, it's a lot easier to hear that if, one, you've taken the feedback they've given you as a manager, and then two, you've helped them win, they're bought in, they trust you, and now they're open and willing to listen and follow, instruction or coaching. If that makes sense.
It absolutely does. And I think about that because it takes me back to my time when I was working for a large tech company here in Seattle, no names given. And it wasn't so much the bad company as it was just, I was working on a team and there was no sense of collaboration, much less no sense of helping each other win. I mean, I kid you not,
Yeah.
I was legitimately trained wrong on purpose by one of my peers who saw me as a threat. And when
Wow.
Oh, I kid you not. Yeah, and that
Yeah.
aspect of when the shit hit the fan, and I came back to my boss saying, "Hey, this is how I was trained to do it." The other guy was like, "I don't know what you're talking about. I'll show you to do something different." And it was he said, she said moment. And
Wow.
I think of not only there was a toxic environment that I ended up quitting the company, and like I said, I ended up that company became a client down the road, so it wasn't bad company, it just was bad team. But when
Right.
I think about what you're talking about of helping each other win, that is monumental to me. That it's a lot easier said than done, but when that becomes a bedrock, a foundation for a team culture, the growth that opens up is, I'm a firm believer that if I help you succeed, I know I'll succeed with it. You being the company, you being my leadership, as I know I can only grow to the level I help the company grow. And I'd
Right.
love to know, just dig on that a little bit deeper in that aspect of, as you're speaking from the management side, then to return back to your SDRs and your team as a whole, helping them win. Can you give any practical insights of what that meant? What was it more the feedback from the training that you're talking about as wins, or is there other ways that you help them win to make them feel that sense of buy-in and ownership of the vision of where you're trying to take that team?
Yeah, absolutely. So when I first started, and context is always important. So I recognize that this may not be, as applicable when you're, a VP of sales for an org that's, 80 people across the team, but it is something that can be done by direct management. And when I started at FieldEdge, I was the director of sales, but had direct oversight and management of the account executive team specifically. So when I came in, my job was coaching and hitting the number and building process and building strategy
Yeah.
and really focusing on how we create that initial part of that customer journey. And so the way that I helped my reps win was, one, coming in and learning as much as possible to begin with before I came in and started making change and adding suggestion. But I also hopped on the phones with people. And so, I wasn't afraid to get on the phone and help close deals. I actually got on the phone and closed my own deals so that they could see that I could do it. And
Yeah.
then when they bought into, okay, she's not crazy, she knows a little bit about what she's talking about, I would collaborate with them, let them run point on a deal, but maybe just be present on the phone and add a point or two here. If we close that deal, that's winning together. And that's vulnerability from my side, by letting them see that, one, I'm willing to get on the phone with you and I'm willing to help be a team player. Let's figure this out together.
I
And so
love
I
that.
think that it made a big impact. And I think it's something that every manager should do if they're in frontline management, when they bring on new people or when they step into a new role, because it just creates a completely different type of bond between that rep and that manager when you guys have had those conversations together. It's not just you giving the feedback, you're talking the talk and you're walking the walk. If that
I think
makes sense.
that's huge because you're leading by example. First off, you're showing that what's being asked of you is not too difficult because you're closing the deals right in front of them. And then secondly,
Right.
you're giving them every opportunity to succeed and being able to guide them along that process. And where there's room for improvement, you're able to speak it out in real time rather than being, hey, you didn't hit your numbers, you didn't hit your metrics. And they're sitting there saying, we don't understand, but you're able to say, you don't even have to have that conversation because you're part of it throughout the whole time.
Yeah, and I think exactly. And I think another thing that it does for you too is it helps you to understand how correct you are in your assumptions about the changes that should happen. So I found a couple of times that I would make recommendations about how to handle specific situations or questions that need to be asked at different places. And when you do it in practice and you see how customers truly respond, sometimes you realize you were wrong.
Hmm.
And that happened a couple of times for me. I ended up adjusting process because I got on the phone with these guys and, we both agreed it just wasn't something that worked in the moment. So that's incredibly valuable as well.
Well, I think that's huge as well, because what you're speaking then there is, as a leader, being able to have the both emotional and intellectual humility to recognize that you're not always right. And I think that
A
takes
hundred percent.
that's a
Yeah.
huge key as a leader, to be able to say, yes, I may be the VP, yes, I may be your boss, but I may not always be 100% right. And having that humility to be able to recognize and acknowledge when that needs to change.
Yeah, exactly. It's absolutely critical in building trust with people. And I think at the end of the day, and when we start talking about scaling and things like that, and obviously that comes with a lot of change, which is pretty difficult for people.
Yeah.
Another thing that does as a part of that process is, you commit to people that, at least we do here, we're going to act quickly. We're going to make decisions incredibly quickly, but we also will correct them even faster if we recognize that they're not working. And so the way that we do that is by looking at data, understanding what the data shows, what the trends are, to back those decisions, and two, from feedback from the front line. Like, are there things that need to be improved in this process? Are there things that are not working? And if we can support that again with that data, then we know it's the wrong decision or the right one, and we can continue down that path.
Oh,
So
absolutely.
it's constantly seeking that feedback and trying to improve and be agile in what we need to do to attack the market or accomplish something.
And attacking the market is exactly what you were able to accomplish in this time. As we alluded to earlier, from what you shared with me, that you were able to take FieldEdge from 7 million to over 35 million. And as we're speaking here, the pillars, what led to that growth? What allows you to scale your business in that way, starting off first with culture and collaboration?
Yeah.
Share this next. What else helped lead to that type of monumental growth in a short amount of time?
Yeah. So I think we just kind of touched on the next one, which is, it's not sexy. People don't like to talk about it, but you've got to build out process and remain agile while you're doing it. And I think that's actually really critical. It's not building in process for the sake of process, but building in process with a purpose. And there's a lot that goes into that that's really important as you grow. And so I think the first thing is, I had a mentor talk to me about this because I'm the kind of person that comes in guns blazing. Sure. And incredibly impulsive and intense, and I would change the world in a day if anybody would let me. But when you're managing salespeople and a sales team, you've got to be slightly more methodical and controlled than that. And so what it described to me was, if there are opportunities to make small incremental adjustments or changes rather than, a complete process change, do that over time and stair step into the bigger change that you're looking for. We don't always have to completely rework a process. Sometimes we can make those small adjustments if possible. And I think that the second really important component of that is explaining the why behind the change. I've done this wrong so many times. I've come into meetings and decided that we were going to completely adjust a key component of the sales process. Never talked about why. But on the other side of that, there was some business driver that required that we insert payments into the conversation. Nobody got while we were pushing it, and we need to better articulate that message of why that's so critical, that it's proposed there and in the way that it's proposed, as an example. And so, we've gotten much better and much more focused on, and it's still something that I focus on daily. Let me identify why we're doing these things and then articulate that as a part of the process change. And that's been really helpful in getting buy-in from people along the way.
Oh, absolutely. I love that aspect because, in essence, it connects back to what you're talking on, culture and collaboration as well. That if I can get you behind the why, you're going to be all the more motivated and excited for that change, even if there is growing pains, because either A, we have to, there's just in order for us to move forward, we can't work with what's from the old ways, or B, this is going to improve your ability to do your job, make more money, have more satisfaction in your role, and that why, rather than just, hey, Jack, Jill, here's what you got to get done. And of course they're always saying, I like my process, I like my methods, I like my style, I have a way I want to do business, and you're trying to mess it up. In explaining that why, I love that aspect, because then you're saying, man, be a part of the vision, be a part of the process, be a part of this journey, rather than just go get this stuff done.
Absolutely. And it's getting people bought into a higher purpose and then helping, as you said or alluded to, helping them understand how it impacts them individually.
Yeah.
Right. And so I think that, love the book, Start with a Why by Simon Sinek. I think it's great. I know a lot of people are big fans of that, but it really is a critical part of how we deliver messages across functionally as well, not just to our own functions, but as a business articulating, what's our purpose? Why are we focused on this? What's the end goal? And then orienting functions and people to their part in it. It's really critical.
That's huge. I love that. And like you alluded to, Simon Sinek, that's been a book I've loved as well.
Yeah, absolutely. He's got a couple of good ones.
So in that, you're talking about process. Are there anything else that you would add to that? Not that I'm looking for more, but make sure I capture the full picture of these pillars that have led to significant growth and ability to scale.
Yeah, I honestly, there are two more that I focus on. I just didn't want to layer them all at one time, or I'd be talking for a straight hour, and it wouldn't be that interesting.
When I'm getting real value, and like I said, for both our audience sake, but for mine, I look at this and I'm like, man, I want to apply these things to my business. My first thought is thinking about our team culture, and am I bringing the people, building that culture, much less collaborating in a way that makes them feel a part of the vision. And you spoke about process. That has been a major issue that we've worked through in our company. We went and hired a professional coach on systems and processes to help implement in our business. So I'm eating this stuff up for my own sake. And I imagine our listeners are saying, well, there's two more. Shit, I want to know them all.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the thing is that we've done some things well, and we've also messed a lot up along the way. And so as a result of that, there have been quite a few learnings. But yeah, I think the last two, one is a culture of, I hate to use the word culture again because I don't mean it to be redundant, but it's really around accountability. And I know that sounds like a dirty word sometimes to people. They think about performance management and or even sometimes associate it with micromanagement, but it's an absolute requirement, and we're seeing it even today. We've kind of stair-stepped into, as we've grown, different types of accountability and different ways of providing that accountability. And so when we first started, the key thing that we really knew was that we had to back everything with data. I alluded to that earlier, but we had to get Salesforce right. We really needed somebody to come in and help us understand, how do we report on the things that we care about? And then how do we measure people against them and let them know what's going on at all times? And so we can do this in ways that are actually motivating and keep people, again, driving towards that individual purpose and their role in the bigger picture. And we do that by letting people know what we're measuring. What are the sort of 3 to 5 key metrics of truth that we always want to monitor? And we actually display those in TVs throughout our office. And different departments have different metrics, obviously, but we display them in front of those departments because those are the team and your individual targets that you're thinking about at all times.
Yeah.
And so it's absolutely incredibly important to help people understand, this is ultimately going to help us to achieve those long-term goals and to help them understand how we're performing against it. So visibility into metrics is key. And then I'd say that, the other piece of accountability is helping people to understand through we do weekly one-on-ones. This is really time for the rep to talk about, the things that they need from management. This isn't micromanagement of processes or numbers. This is, how are things going? How can I help? What do you have on the radar this week? The second piece of that is a monthly one-on-one, which is more performance management. Let's talk about those KPIs and those metrics that we have displayed everywhere. How are you performing against them? Where do you think the gaps are? How can I help? And then the quarterly one-on-ones are more of a time of reflection and planning. And so, when I think the reason why I throw those meetings into accountability is because it's accountability of different things, not just numbers. And it's really helping people to understand with regular frequency each one of those components. Yeah. What can management do better? What can you do better from a day-to-day perspective? What do we need to be working on together to get to the metrics that we want to achieve? And then looking back, what did we do really well? What do we need to improve? What are our goals for next quarter, and how are we getting there?
Yeah.
And so that's really helpful in keeping people motivated and focused on sort of the day-to-day, if that makes sense. And that's been really helpful for us in helping to, ultimately hit team and functional goals as well as business goals.
Absolutely. And I think what I get excited hearing that is the initial thought, may be, oh, man, it's a lot of meetings, weekly, monthly, quarterly, but each one has a unique purpose, and it's not a meeting. I think we're all tired of having meetings to have meetings, or having to show up and just, basically brag to you what we've got done, or sit there in shame if we didn't get our numbers done. But that each one is, you talk about the weeklies. I love that aspect, that's the opportunity for me, the SDR, to share with my leadership what's working and what's not. It's, I remember one of my times in leading a marketing team, and my boss, I met with her weekly, and she called it red light, green light. I want to know, what are the 3 things that are stopping you? What are the 3 things that you feel that you're able to run a full-fledged on? What are my red lights? What are my green lights? And I came to every meeting prepared to let her know what's working, and what those red lights were. We would then discuss what needed to change in that moment to turn that red light into a green light. And where I felt
love that,
what my green lights were then here's where I got real momentum. Here's where I'm seeing real growth. Here's where I got a lot of excitement. And that way she then knew for me what was propelling me forward. What was, where would I get my joy, my satisfaction in my job? And if they're, and that's, I love what you're sharing there, is that weekly time. That's not for the management to sit there and be like, shame on you, or you're hitting your numbers, you're not hitting your numbers. That can come in the monthlies, but the weeklies is all how do you turn those red lights to green lights.
Yeah, I love the red light, green light sort of focus. I think that's great. At the end of the day, like, these don't have to be long meetings. And I think one of the things that I realized, because I get it, one-on-ones are daunting. They're not fun for management at all. And by the way, they're not fun for the rep either. So nobody enjoys them. But, if you can keep them predictable and consistent, and I think that's the hardest part. I think people really struggle with remaining consistent and delivering them. But when you do that, you have exactly what you described. People put thought into it, and it's a meaningful discussion. And at the end of the day, if you're doing that consistently, like, people is 90, it's 95% of the job from a frontline manager's perspective. We've got to be managing our people and helping to keep them motivated, and hearing feedback and listening to how we need to shift and pivot. And so I think it's really critical, as painful as it is, but it doesn't need to be super formatted. They can be, as you described, quick check-ins. And I think that really helps.
And is that something, like I was talking earlier from the practical standpoint, is that something that, in regards to the weekly, monthly, quarterly, who's organizing that? Is that the job? Is it the job of the manager to be scheduling those times, or more weekly? Should it be the job of the SDR to say, hey, I want to get on your calendar? Or is it just welcome to FieldEdge, day 1, we're going to be having these weekly one-on-ones. How about Tuesday at 2:00?
Yeah.
We're trying to implement this of someone who's not doing it yet. Who should take responsibility?
Fair question. I'd say the thing about leaving it up to the rep to schedule that time, I love the idea of that, because you get to see who's motivated and interested in receiving feedback and progressing. The problem with that is, if you allow that, a lot of people in some scenarios are shy about asking for time. They're worried that, they're taking time away from other people, or they don't want to bug their manager.
Yeah.
And you'll see that people that really need help typically don't raise their hand. And the people that you've got, other people that'll constantly raise their hand, and the person that screams loudest gets the most attention.
Sure.
And so what I like about having, what we do here is, our team leads and managers, depending upon the function, will schedule those weekly one-on-ones. So those are, again, really casual. Like, they may go out on a walk around the business complex. It doesn't have to be stuffy and in a conference room behind computer screens. It's, let's go take a walk. Let's check in for the week. It can be, over a game of ping pong and a beer after 5 p.m. They don't need to be structured, but they do need to happen. And then from a monthly perspective, this usually is led by, again, those managers. but with support from the function head. So as an example, on our AE team, our sales managers would be involved in structuring and running those monthly one-on-ones. And, we do document those things as well. And we do it not because we're trying to get too formal in terms of like HR process, but just because we want to be able to reference those things later. And that's really important in people's development as well, is to be able to look back and see, this is what we talked about last month. How are we tracking against that?
Yeah.
And so that's more of your, and I look at those. So I come in and I look at how did we do in the month? Like what were the thoughts and messages across different teams? So
awesome.
That's kind of how those run. Yeah.
Thank you. I love that, because I hear great ideas. I'm like, where do I begin to implement them? Where do I start? And so I was like asking that second level of, all right, step one, what do I do here?
Yeah. Yeah. And I know it's hard. The problem is, like, as your team gets bigger, it becomes more and more of a time suck. I think you've got to block time for it so that it is consistent. Otherwise, it gets deprioritized and it falls off the calendar, because there are always fires that pop up, and that's the hard part.
I think that's true.
I think the last pillar, to answer your question on the pillars, is energy. So I know that sounds like a weird pillar, but we have to maintain energy at all times. And what I mean by that is, I mean passion, one. So again, orienting people to the why and creating purpose through that common goal. We've got to make it exciting too. And a big way that we do that here, and because the SDR gig is an example, or even other functions in the business, customer success, onboarding, all of it, they're a grind. And so we have to keep people motivated and excited to come into work every day. And to do that, we celebrate success in a couple of different ways. We celebrate team wins, obviously. Those are, we actually have what we call TAFE meetings. They're Today at FieldEdge meetings. And these are company-wide meetings where different function heads get up on, video now, and they talk about, highlights of, what's happened across the function in, the past week or 2 weeks. And so we found that open communication and sort of celebration of functional wins is really great, so that everybody sees again how we're tracking against those functional and organizational goals. But we also do things in small things in team meetings. We make sure that we're calling out individual performances in every team meeting that we have, so that people are seeing success and being, recognized. And another thing that we're really big on is we automate, a lot of emails and things like that go out when different things happen. And as a result of that, we have sort of this celebration when different things happen. We'll get automated emails when sales close. We get automated emails when demos are scheduled. And, the whole team will stand up and clap when sales happen, and people will cheer when demos come across. And that kind of environment, and just kind of keeping people, recognizing their contribution and recognizing their peers, has been really helpful in keeping people energized and passionate about what they do every day and about the team that they're a part of. And at the end of the day, you got to have that as you scale. I know it's a really weird pillar, but it's so important.
I think that's huge. And I'm glad you bring that up, because I think that aspect of being able to celebrate each other's success, it all ties into what the other four pillars that we've talked about, and creating that culture that, hey, when we have that energy and the passion is there, we're bought into the why, the culture is there it's not dog eat dog. It's not, I'm out for myself. I'm not out just to see my own success, but I want to celebrate your wins too, because we're all in this together. And that's the collaboration of being able to work together. The collaboration comes once I have an understanding of passion. And I can go through all of these, but I think that aspect that I love and what you're sharing here is that all these pillars build upon each other. None stand by themselves. They all have to work together. You can't have accountability if there isn't culture or collaboration. You can't have a follow through in a process if there isn't accountability. You can't have culture if there's not energy. They all work together. And so it's clear that in this implementation, what's then propelled you being able to build that team from 7 mil to 35 mil and beyond. But these have been super practical and insightful to know what led to that success. And like we talked about, without losing your mind, that this wasn't something that A, was done overnight, or B, that required so much change in the company that people said, screw it, I'm out of here.
Right. Yeah, 100%. And you brought up a fair point, Kyle. Maybe I should stop calling them pillars. They overlap a little bit, and they do rely upon each other. So maybe that's the wrong way to describe
it. Well, maybe it's like Stonehenge, where there are pillars that all connect to each other with some top.
There you go. Exactly. Maybe that's how I'll describe it next time.
And it stands for years. We never know who built it. It was just amazing. All right. Now
yeah, exactly.
Well, Cassie, just to wrap it up, I think we've had some huge value here, some huge insights in regards to being able to scale a business. I know this is kind of a curveball question in the way that you may not have a clear answer yet, and I'll understand if there isn't. But if there is a way you could say, hey, if 7 mil was a previous ceiling, you broke that to 35 mil. What are you working on towards next? What's that? When we have you back on that on our podcast, you talk about either new pillars that you're working through or new changes that you're going through. Is there any new challenges that you're seeing in the company that you're feeling like, oh, I got some real motivation to work through this element right now?
Yeah, absolutely. If we weren't forward looking, we'd be moving in reverse, right? Yeah, I think that right now, 2 key areas that we're really focused on are, one, doing more to drive new revenue through new channels. So really working on building out our partner network and our business development function. And so we've seen some great success in that over the past year. But it's taken a year to lay the foundation. And so I think for us, the next phase of growth is really starting to have a firm grasp on how we go to market in different ways with different partners.
Yeah.
And how we execute that effectively and efficiently. We've had some learnings there already, but we certainly have more to do. And I think that the second thing is in customer success. So I think we've been so new acquisition focused and just trying to gain as much market share as possible and to get the platform out there, get feedback on it and iterate, that we've not focused a ton on expanding the wallet with the customer and not just expanding the wallet, but expanding value. I don't think that we are prepared yet and have learned what we need to learn just yet to really make sure that we're driving as much revenue as I think we could through that function. And that starts with better understanding, how do we provide more value and help businesses meet their goals using the platform. And there's a lot to be learned there.
Sure.
So it should be an exciting few years.
I love that. Thank you. I'm excited to see what comes out of that because I think that's very, very insightful to know. How do we hit this? It's one thing to have great momentum and growth, but if you, like you said, if you're not moving forward in future planning, you're moving backwards. So I'm always excited to hear what businesses are working on to sustain that growth and take them to that next level.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
One last kind of fun question. You highlighted 2 books that have been pivotal in your journey as leading the sales team, both A Radical Candor by Kim Scott, Simon Sinek's Start With Why. I will provide links for those in our show notes. Is there any other books? Is there one that you'd say, man, this has been a game changer for me as #1 influence in my life, or I just read this book and it's been pivotal to me? Is there anything that you'd say, I've really enjoyed what I'm getting out of this?
I read probably 5 books at a time. I love consuming as much as possible. And particularly business books and certainly some novels as well. But let me think about that. There's so many that have been just absolutely groundbreaking for me.
Yeah.
I think Challenger Sale was a big one. Again, kind of cliche, but I really enjoyed the thought process of how to think about challenging a customer's existing thought process and what they know about the industry and business today and how to modify a mindset that way. I think there's so many. The Culture Code was a fantastic book by Daniel Coy. And that's been a great example of what to think about when you're thinking about building a culture and of winning, but building real rock stars that feel invested in and bought into your bigger vision. There's a ton. I'd be happy to send over a list.
Hey, sure. Yeah, we can easily do that. But I think, I appreciate getting some insights now because while I've consumed Start With Why multiple times, I own Radical Candor, but haven't started it yet. And I'm going to look into Challenger Sale and the Culture Code as well. So thank you for that. I always love just, like you said, my wife teases me. We'll go on vacation and I'll pack, Inc. magazine, Forbes, Cigar Aficionado is like my one book. Yeah. And then it's like 3 business books. And she's like, we're on vacation. Where's something to enjoy? I enjoy reading this stuff. She's like, well, it's business. Yeah. I love business. So I'm on that element of always one more.
I do the same. Yeah. And unfortunately, I still love a hardback book. So my bag is usually packed full of those hardback books instead of a Kindle, which makes life difficult on a vacation. But, it is what it is.
Hey, I'm 100% with you. I outline highlight, write notes in all my books, and I can't do that as well as on a Kindle. So I love having, I kind of get that. Without having a photographic memory, I have that feeling when I read a book of, I know my notes are on that left column, third way into the book. I got to go find it. I can't do that on a Kindle. So I'm with you.
Exactly, yeah. There's something about the trophy at the end of it too, right?
Right.
So yeah, I'm with you on it.
Yeah. Well, Cassie, thank you so much for your time today. It's been a real honor having you on the show, sharing our pillars for being able to scale your business. Absolutely insightful and practical. Really appreciate your time here.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me.
Hey, I want to thank you very much for joining us for this episode of Marketing from the Roosevelt Room. I know you have a lot of options on what podcasts you can listen to, so thank you sincerely for taking the time to join us for this one. If you have enjoyed this conversation, would love to keep it going in our Facebook group, Marketing from the Roosevelt Room with Kyle Willis. In that, we have live video, Q&A, and create more of a dialogue. Would love to keep the conversation going, so please join us on Facebook. Otherwise, look forward to catching you on our next episode. Have a great day.